So today I thought I'd do one of those good and bad videos, a look back at the year of all the, mainly the bad things that happened this year. I'm going to start with the bad. And I lost my whole okra crop. The whole crop. I don't think I got any. I got about 5 okra, which I'm saving for my seeds for next year. I just left them up until the first frost, and the first frost was a really bad frost, and it was so bad that basically it just wrecked the whole crop. So I don't know now what to do about this. I quite like okra. I use it as like a radish alternative over winter, but it's a lot of work. I grow it in containers, and that means watering every few days all the way through summer. It's a lot of work. So I like to reduce the amount of work I do every year, getting older and all that. So I think I'm going to cut my losses. I'm only going to probably grow 2 tubs instead of 10 tubs of okra next year. And yeah, it's quite a big change for me, but I think it's worth it. So I lost quite a lot of other, I'm just looking at things on the iPad, by the way, if you wonder why I'm looking down. I lost a lot of other things to the frost as well. I lost all of the outdoor chard, and so I'm really pleased that I've got a little bit of chard in the polytunnel behind me, which has survived, so I will at least have some chard in spring. I lost all of the field beans that I bought from Premier Seeds, so they're obviously a variety that are killed by frost. The ones I got from King Seeds, which are the big ones, they're fine. So that is good news. I'll just buy the ones from King Seed from now on. They don't seem to have a variety name on field beans. They're just sort of generically described as field beans, so you're never quite sure what you're getting. Anyway, King Seeds are the ones to get. And I lost most of the broad beans as well. So I lost all the ones in the polytunnel. And I lost most of the ones on Debbie's plot. And a few maybe sort of cling on. But anyway, I'm just going to resow them all. It's just not worth it. I'm going to keep on doing broad beans over winter because it's the first time I've ever lost the full crop. Yeah, I'm not really sure why. I think it's just because of that really warm autumn we had. The broad beans were really big, and I suspect that big, maturing plants are just too susceptible to the frost, whereas little small ones, especially if you protect them with fleece, are okay. And I lost all of my beetroot that wasn't in store. Fortunately, everything we need to last us until sort of May time is in store. So the stuff that we got left outside, we couldn't fit in the store. So that was just a bonus. And in the end, it turned out not to be a bonus because we lost it all. All the red varieties, Red Bull and Red Ball, Brussels sprouts, we lost all those. All the green ones were fine. We only really grow the red Brussels sprouts for the leaves in autumn, and so it's not a big loss, that we lost the plants now because we'd already eaten all the leaves. And the early varieties of the purple sprouting broccoli. So I grew 3 varieties: Red Admiral, Red Fire and Claret. The Red Admiral and Red Fire were for harvest in sort of December, January, February, March. And the Claret for April and May. The Claret seems okay. The Red Fire and the Red Admiral, they're not looking very good. And again, that gets me thinking, are these winter varieties of purple sprouting broccoli, which are not as prolific as the spring variety, Claret, are they worth it? Because you dedicate a lot of ground for a lot of time, and that ground could be used for something more reliable, like colettes and Brussels sprouts, green varieties of Brussels sprouts, which have been fine, even in this really fierce weather. So, yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe not worth growing as I say, the early varieties of purple sprouting broccoli. I don't know whether I'll do it this year or not, but I'm certainly wondering whether it's worth it. Cauliflower seedlings. The little cauliflower seedlings seem to be really susceptible to frost. I lost all of those. The bigger ones, once they're this sort of size, they were fine. To be honest, those little ones, maybe wasn't such a good idea to start them quite so late. All the celery, of course, outside, we lost all of that. The celery in the polytunnel, I thought I'd lost it all. It was all drooping, you know, all the cell membranes had obviously been damaged in the plants. I didn't know, you know, whether to take those out or not. Anyway, I cut them all back, and the new growth looks really good. So maybe that cold snap will just force them to bolt really early in spring. But for now, I'm just leaving them because I've got nothing else to go in their place. And as I say, they're looking pretty healthy now. And I lost a third of my lettuce seedlings. Now, it's always a bit of a risk when you put lettuce in December. Although, to be honest, I've always taken this risk and it always paid off. And it always means getting lettuce about a month earlier in spring. And the reason I do it, of course, is because I want my favourite spring varieties rather than my favourite winter varieties. Anyway, I've replaced them all and they're all looking nice now, so I'm not so worried about that. So that were all the frost losses, quite a lot really, although it's kind of just really taught me a few good lessons about the priorities of various different things. And I think over winter, the priority is mainly for resilience. You know, I want a crop that I can depend on. I don't want to be worrying over winter about losing a crop. And so that kind of dependency, just psychologically, you know, it's nice not to worry when you've got bad weather that you're going to lose something. So I think I'm going to kind of default to things I don't need to worry about so much in winter, which is not a big change for me, but it's few little changes. So the final thing I think on the losses were to the frost were the potatoes. Now I'm not sure how many of my potatoes I have lost, but I harvested for Christmas a whole load of baking, like 40 baking potatoes, and I think we lost about 10 of those, and they were just the ones that were really near the surface, and so they're all, you know, they're all frozen. I've got loads of the potatoes stored in the compost. I'm a bit nervous, to be honest, about harvesting them. I think quite a lot of them are going to be mush. Fortunately, we're not eating as many potatoes as we used to do, and so we don't need that many between now and May when we'll have new potatoes again. So maybe I'll be all right. I don't know. As I said, I'm a bit nervous. I haven't harvested any since. So, in summer, 2/3 of our onions went to seed. 2/3. It was really frustrating. Normally I might have like 10% of them go to seed, but 2/3 of them. It was quite shocking, really. Now, I put this down to the fact that they weren't the variety that I bought. There was some random variety. There may have been a good variety, I don't know, because I never really got to try them very much, because so many of them went to seed. We did just put them in the kind of use now box, and, you know, we got through as many as we could. And I think we'll get through till May. We've got just about enough onions now just to get through. We didn't waste very many of them. But it's just frustrating, you know, because they could have grown to twice the size had they not gone to seed. The trouble when things go to seed is it's not that they're not edible. It's just they put all of their effort into growing the seed stalk and the flower and not putting their effort into growing the bulb. Anyway, fortunately, we did grow some from sets and some shallots as well, and the combination of those two and the few that didn't go to seed, we managed to get through. So the next one is that the summer lettuces in the kitchen garden, they all got root aphid. So that's happened now for 2 years running in August, and it never seems to happen on the allotment. So last year, in anticipation of a root aphid problem, I did grow a second parallel crop of lettuce on the allotment, and they didn't get root aphid. So I think that's just the solution, is just I won't grow any lettuces for consumption in August at home in the kitchen garden. I'll grow them only in the period May, June, July in the kitchen garden, then I'll move back to the allotment. So it's not a big change for me, but slightly inconvenient, but not so much so. This really discouraged me. So far in my gardening career, I have not had any club root. This year, I've had club root in 2 locations, one on Debbie's plot and one on my plot. The one on my plot wiped out the whole Colette harvest in my main Colette bed. I just didn't get anything. That was a huge blow because we love Colettes in winter. Fortunately, I had done 4 Colette plants in another bed and they are still giving us a really nice harvest now. So it wasn't a kind of total disaster. I'm still getting a few Colettes in my steamed veg mix. But just having that bed now wiped out from planting brassicas in it for a few years, it's just really annoying, you know, because just managing rotation for me is a massive challenge because, you know, when you grow as many different successions and so many different varieties like I do, the logistics of doing rotations is pretty much impossible. But now I'm kind of forced to do, you know, not just a rotation, but, you know, I don't know, I'll give it like 3 or 4 years of gap year, basically, gap years. Really, really discouraging. So anyway, it's just like it's an opportunity to grow some more of something that I haven't grown before. So I'm having a good old think about that because I'm just doing the planning at the moment. And, you know, I've managed to squeeze in Colettes in other beds, and I'll just make sure that I use a lot more lime on the brassica beds than I have in the past, because in the past I've always, my compost of choice is mushroom compost, and that is quite alkali. It does have lime added to it. Last year I couldn't get any mushroom compost, so in fact last 2 years not being able to get it, so I've just been using my own homemade compost, and I haven't been adding the lime to it in the brassica beds because I just kind of got out of the habit of doing that because of the mushroom compost. Anyway, I'm putting it down to that. Hopefully that's the only reason, and if I keep on top of the lime in, then I won't get club root again. So what else? Yeah, so normally we have rain. We don't have rain in spring, but we do start getting rain in August here. This year it's kind of inverted, that we got some rain in late spring and then we didn't get anything through summer at all. So nothing in July, nothing in August, and it was well into September before we got rain. That was a real, I just spoilt summer a bit, not totally, but spoilt summer a little bit for me, just having to do so much watering. And, you know, the crops suffered as well because I couldn't do quite as much watering as I'd want to do. Anyway, it's just made me double down on the fact that, you know, wherever possible, I'm not going to grow things that need a lot of water on the allotment, and I'm not going to grow anything in summer in containers. I'm still going to use containers early in the year and late in the year, but I'm not going to do anything in containers in summer other than these 2 perhaps containers of ochre, and even those I might move home. So yeah, just steady progression really for me is using less and less water on the allotment, and it's not because water's expensive or anything. I mean, water's dirt cheap. I only use probably about £40 worth of water a year or something, absolutely trivial amount of water by comparison with the harvest value, and that's in the garden and on 2 allotments. But it's just the physical effort of watering and keeping on top of it. It's too much, especially in containers, as I said. Next one, garlics. Yeah, they all got rust. We still got a decent crop, but it was all smaller, you know, than it would have been otherwise. And then the rust from the garlic got onto the leeks because it's the same type of rust. And so then the leeks had got rust. I had to keep on taking outer leaves off the leeks in order to keep on top of those. Yeah, a real pain, but we still got a leek crop, so it's not a complete disaster. I also, so this with, I did most of my salad onions interplanted into beds, which is kind of what I always do. But then I kind of changed my strategy a little bit so that I was going to clear those beds and get them replanted. And so I ended up with like loads and loads of beds with salad onions in them, where I'd taken out the main crop and the salad onions were left over. and it was then very difficult to interplant into those beds with salad onions in, so I had to kind of eat those salad onions really quickly. So yeah, I just gonna have to make sure that I remember that interplanting's a great idea if you get your timings right, but if you get your timings wrong, it's really annoying. I've grown radicchio for quite a few years and I've never really liked it. People keep telling me, oh, radicchio, it's so lovely in winter. And I just, unfortunately, I think, you know, mine and my family's taste, we just don't like radicchio. People say it's bittersweet. Well, I just never get the sweet bit of the bittersweet. It's always just bitter to me. So unfortunately, my palate and radicchio don't go together. So that's another thing that I'm not growing any more of. And this year, you know, last year I grew a lot of lettuces under grow lights, and this year I grew a lot of lettuces under grow lights, and I always trying new varieties out to see which ones do the best under the grow lights. And the problem is tip burn. It's really difficult to get the compost mix right so that the lettuces don't suffer from tip burn under grow lights. And this is a well-known kind of problem with indoor lettuces. And you know, so in hydroponic systems it's also a problem as well, and you know, you have to balance the hydroponic mixture to, you know, reduce the risk of tip burn. So I've pretty much decided that of the common lettuces that I grow, the only one really that does really well under grow lights is Navara. So I'm just going to stop doing any trials of my existing batches of lettuce. I'm just going to do Navara. Although I'm going to do some small trials of some commercial lettuce varieties that are bred specifically not to suffer from tip burn. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been great. At least I did like 2/3 of them as Navara. So, okay, at 17 minutes. So I'm quickly going to go through the good. So we did do at least £8,000 in value worth of harvest this year. So that was really good. It was more than last year, even though we spent less time gardening and had less space dedicated to gardening. Yeah, I mean, I still just keep on getting a little bit better each year. And as a result, harvest volumes keep on going up, even though I'm putting, as I say, less effort in. So we did, as I mentioned, we had some rain in spring, which was really nice because normally we don't get any rain in spring. The new vertical squash bed was fantastic. So I've got this really long vertical climbing squash bed, permanent squash bed. And it's just in between my plot and Simon and Ellie's plot. And it grows, the squash actually grow in where the old fence was. So it takes up no space at all. It was fantastic. We got loads and loads of squash off it. So I've built another one for this year. So I'm going to have 2 permanent squash beds on the allotment. And that, you know, has increased quite considerably the amount that we can grow. We grew a lot more potatoes than we needed. So the potato alley that I created down the side of the house in this sort of micro orchard area, that worked really well, even though it was quite shaded. We grew loads of potatoes. Unfortunately, we don't eat as many potatoes now, so it's kind of a bit bittersweet, that one. But it did teach me that actually that is a really good growing area, especially for anything that likes shady conditions. So I think I'm going to do some sort of like microgreens of kales and spinach and things like that down there in those pots. Not just potatoes, maybe even a few lettuces and things like that. I think it'll be quite nice. We did allow us also to decide on our 2 favourite potato varieties, which are going to be Charlotte and Estima. I've tried all sorts of different things over the years, and really just those 2 stand out for me. So what else? Yeah, I still struggled to get enough lettuce in midwinter. I'm always trying, you know, to get enough, but we eat so much lettuce, you know, at least 10 servings of lettuce. And that's a big, you know, big bowl of lettuce every week for Debbie and I. And then there's the kids, and you know, etc. It's just a lot of lettuce to get through, and of course, it doesn't grow very fast. I've done a lot better this year. I've grown a lot specifically for harvest in winter. That's kind of down here. I'm going to do more of that because it's been quite successful. And yeah, and I've grown a lot of things in addition to lettuce to go into salad mixes. So lots of Asian greens and winter miners lettuce and lamb's lettuce and all that sort of thing. Still keep on chugging along. One year I'll get to the point where I don't feel kind of like I'm restricted at all in terms of the amount of lettuce that I can harvest. It's just shocking what happens when light levels just drop below that sort of threshold in sort of mid-December and everything just completely stops growing, and then you're like, what do I do now? Because I just can't harvest anything. Because nothing, if I harvest it, then it's not going to regrow. So I just get that one harvest just before Christmas, and then a complete kind of inability to harvest anything until February. It's like, what do you do over that 5-week period? It's really challenging. So yeah, last year I grew my summer carrots in containers, and I thought, oh, this is really nice, they're growing really well. And then, yeah, they didn't grow very well, to be honest. Just again, carrots in containers means loads and loads of watering. I don't come down to the allotment enough to keep on top of that watering. And also, they're outside, not under mesh, and so, they end up getting carrot root fly. This year, I grew all my summer carrots under cover. Absolutely fantastic by comparison. In fact, there was no real comparison. To me, the only way to grow carrots in summer, particularly, is in the ground, if you can. Yeah, so but still grow carrots over winter in containers. I've got some just up here for harvest in May and June. That's the kind of sweet spot, really, I think, for carrots in containers. Yacon. Again, what a fabulous crop, or yacon as some people call it. Absolutely fantastic, really big tubers, keep really well if you can kind of harvest them at the right time. I harvested mine a little bit late, but still really, really nice, and a great alternative, really, to potatoes. Sweet, crunchy, no starch in them. Really lovely. So the other thing I did was I started interplanting into my pepper beds. So last year I had 5 pepper beds, and I interplanted like at the back of them. Beetroot, they did fantastically well, and then lettuces around the front of them, they did really well. It just opened up a huge amount of extra space for me that I'd never really considered using before. I'm only doing 3 beds of peppers this year outside. I'm doing 1 bed in the polytunnel because I just don't need quite as many peppers as I now am able to grow. But I'm still going to do that. Loads and loads of interplanting into those beds. And yeah, I've also started using hanging baskets a lot more in the polytunnel. So as I said, I don't do anything in containers on the allotment this year in summer, but in early season and late season, hanging baskets are just really great. They get loads of light, they're up away from the pests. They're easy to look after, not in summer obviously, but they're easy to look after in autumn, winter and spring. Just an extra kind of bonus layer of space. They don't cast any shade to speak of. I just love them. And obviously I've always used hanging baskets for my early strawberries, but anyway, I'm just using hanging baskets now for everything that I can think of. Really great. So parsnips, I've done a lot of parsnips this year, and I had an early crop which ready in August, and of course my main crop that ready through autumn and winter. What I also did though is, in addition to the early crop, and I did a video especially about the early crop, which I really like, because all this is a myth really, I think, that parsnips sweeten up after a frost. Well, they might sweeten up a little bit, but they're really sweet anyway. So they don't need to sweeten up that much. In fact, I find parsnips a bit too sweet, so I actually like them before they've sweetened up even more. So the challenge with parsnips is they're such a incredibly low value crop, and they're in the ground for such a long period of time, and it's hard to justify growing them. So I've done 2 years now of experimenting with interplanting into the gaps between the parsnips when they're young plants, onions, I've done salad onions, they worked fantastically, although they're a little bit tricky to harvest. I've done main crop onions and I've done main crop zerbun shallots. All three of them did really, really well interplanted with the parsnips, so I'm just going to keep on doing that. And, you know, because you're getting two harvests out of the same ground with no interference between the two, so there's no like compromises in the density of the planting or anything like that, and the harvest seems to be completely unaffected, you know, the size of the harvest. So it does make growing a decent amount of parsnips cost effective finally, so I'm really happy with that approach. I also planted some quite late, so normally I start my sort of parsnips in April, I think. So this time I had a failed germination. By the time I'd kind of given them time to germinate, obviously it'd been like 3 or 4 weeks later than I normally do. And the ones that I did that much later, they didn't obviously grow as much leaf because they were growing later on in the season. They didn't need as much leaf. But the parsnips were lovely and they seemed to get less canker. So I'm thinking, oh, I'll give that another go, just do a bit more late ones. And that means I can get my spring crop out of the ground before I put my parsnips in. So it makes the economics even better. So I always have a winter crop, of course. So it's, probably have like spinach over winter and then parsnips in the spring and the summer and then the winter. But now I could probably get spinach, another crop in the middle, sort of like lettuce or something like that in spring, and then put the parsnips in really late spring after I've taken the lettuces out. So, and interplant with onions. So that's like 4 harvests out of the same area of ground, and that is, yeah, making it really quite cost effective to grow. So there's a few other interplants that I was really happy with this year. Salad onions between lettuces in spring, early beetroot at the back of my low tunnels that I grow the peppers in. You could grow them, of course, at the back of any low tunnel, but the benefit of growing them at the back of the pepper ones is that you keep the low tunnels on, and beetroot really like it warm. They really respond well to warmth, so you get especially good harvest there. Early peas at the back of low tunnels as well, they really like it until about April, at which time they'll start getting too warm, so you need to interplant them with something that doesn't mind having their top taken off in April, something like spinach or lettuce. Leeks between the colettes and the bustles, done that for 2 years now. They get bashed around a lot, but there's not many things you can grow in between. And the beauty of leeks is that by the time you've kind of cleared the lower leaves off your colettes and your bustles, the leeks have got loads of light then. So that's always worked nicely for me. And we had a few other experiments that really paid off nicely. So that was early graffiti cauliflowers, which I'm about to sow, I think on the 16th of January. They were exceptional. What a great harvest, and really nice and early. So I don't really need to do so many overwinter cauliflowers when I can start them in January and still be harvesting basically at the same time. And the purple graffiti ones as well, not just these boring white ones. The red cabbages did really well. I'm just doubling down on red cabbages, although they're really cheap in the shops, which is a bit depressing. They're just so healthy and look so beautiful. Late sown kales, so sowing kale in August and then covering it up with a low tunnel in October means I don't need anywhere near as much kale planted in the summer, and again that means I can get an extra summer crop, so that's really nice. The February sown Asian greens did really well, so I was very, very happy with those. So I sowed some in December and just planted them out. So I want to see if I can get my new crop of Asian greens even earlier, because my sort of September sown crop of Asian greens tend to go to seed in sort of February sort of time. So I'm looking for sort of continuity there. The late peas, they were a real surprise. So they're a variety called Terrain, not meant to suffer from mildew as much. But by planting them late, we were harvesting them in late September, October, November, really long period, and of course they stood on the plants much longer than they would in summer, and also too late for pea moth. So for me now, I'm kind of just growing peas early in the season and late in the season, nothing in the middle because of pea moth. The miner's lettuce, we just love miner's lettuce. It's fantastic. It's a little bit more tricky to harvest than ordinary lettuce, but it's so hardy and it does so well in the polytunnel. I love it. And the Brighton lettuce, so that is the best lettuce I've found for starting in autumn for a harvest now. So I've got, I don't know how many plants here, 9 plants, and I wish I'd got 18 plants really, and I probably will have next year, because it just does really well. Normally lettuce at this time of the year, it kind of goes a bit limp really, because it's not got enough energy from the sun, but this Brighton is holding really well, still good leaf texture and all that sort of thing. So that's it. 30 minutes. Oh well, my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.